Welcome. So I love talks like this when I get invited to speak and they say, just talk about anything. No pre-planned talk needed. And I will tell you, I have absolutely no idea what's going to come out of my mouth next, what I'm going to say or talk about. Which is great, because you can go online and see me do my standard presentation if you want, or attend one of our free webinars, whatever. But it's rare that I get to just kind of go into whatever feels most alive and inspired in my world to share, which is the invitation I had here. So I'm gonna do that. First, I'd love to just get a sense of the room. How many of you are in companies that are actually practicing Holacracy right now? Oh, wow, a lot of you. Okay, great. Like 2/3 or so. How many of you are reasonably familiar with Holacracy, but not in a company that's actually doing it? Okay, and anyone like totally new? Maybe you've read a little bit, but mostly new to it. Okay, a few of you, great. Okay, good. Given that skew then, I'll share more about kind of some of the leading edge stuff that I'm seeing in this world. And I'll also maybe keep this shorter and leave more time for the Q&A dialogue afterwards so that I can actually speak to your specific interests and topics. So, yeah, man, there's a lot happening in the Holacracy world. So I don't know who's followed it, but we released a new version of the Holacracy Constituion earlier this year, version 5.0. We version control it just like open source software. So Holacracy is a framework. The framework has a set of rules and captured in a constitution. And that constitution evolves based on input from the community doing it. The latest version, 5.0, the thing that excites me most about 5.0 is I think we addressed one of the things that makes it hardest to adopt. There are certainly many companies in the earlier version that jumped in and adopted all of Holacracy all at once. That was the way you kind of had to do it in version 4.1, the prior one and earlier. And when they succeed, it's really remarkable. I've heard so many stories, so many companies saying I would never go back when they succeed. But it's also a big change, and it's a lot to swallow all at once. It's also so significant that many companies don't even try. I've heard from many people that say, it sounds great, but it's too daunting to do all that at once. So with version 5.0, we restructured the entire rule set, the constitution, the framework. And we broke it down into 5 different segments, 5 articles, if you will, 5 different groups of rules that are independent. The first one builds the foundation, but the other 4 you can adopt in any order you want, to whatever extent you want, when you want. In fact, you don't even have to adopt it all. We now have more companies in the world saying, we don't actually want to do all of Holacracy, but we want better management hierarchy. Right? What can we do with that? The answer is, start with Article 1 of the Holacracy Constitution. Right? If you just adopt Article 1 of the new version, it gives you a framework for defining roles. You can still have managers and top-down hierarchy and all that, but you have a message to your managers, which is stop micromanaging and start clarifying your expectations of people. And when you give an expectation, right, like delegate, let them actually do it. This is what Holacracy does well. We want this in management hierarchies too. You can start there. Give them a language for defining the work, which makes it easier to be a better manager. It's hard to be a manager. We want managers that create clarity and empower others, and that's hard. So we get managers who micromanage. And when you do get one who's actually good at empowering others and creating clarity, they get promoted and replaced by somebody who sucks at it, because there's not enough to go around. Right? So of course it's hard. There's no tools in our modern management arsenal that work really well for creating clarity and empowering. So Article 1 of Holacracy 5.0 gives you a tool for that. You can still have all the management hierarchy you want, and here's a tool that forces your managers, or gives you a language for your managers to create clarity, create structure, delegate, and empower. Right, cool. And when you're ready, adopt any of the other 4. Right, want better meetings? Well, okay, there's an article all about that. Let's have better just operational meetings, tactical meetings in Holacracy speak. Right, and create some rules for that. Right. When you're ready, why not get others involved in changing these roles and policies? Adopt the article on governance that allows you to invite everyone into the process of learning and evolving the structure. And this removed the biggest roadblock for a lot of companies adopting Holacracy. The change felt too big all at once. Now it doesn't. Now it's about perfecting your existing thing, making management better, until you get to the point where you're so good at managing, it's so baked in to the way your company works, that everyone does it, and it's as simple as breathing, and it's no longer a special thing delegated to a class of managers. And in this way, I think fascinating, in the press sometimes I'll get accused of being anti-management, which I never understood. I'm probably the biggest fan of even management hierarchy. It's worked brilliantly. We're not here talking about new ways because management hierarchy has failed us. We're here talking about new ways because it has succeeded so wildly that it helped build the world today, which is more complex than it can manage. Right? Management hierarchy worked great 100 years ago. It was just fine for the challenge we faced then. Environments were more static. They were far less complex. Right? We didn't have a workforce demanding meaning and purpose. Oh, that's hard. At least in management hierarchy, that's hard. But beautiful when you can offer people that to connect with their sense of meaning and purpose. You get so much more than their hands. You get their hearts, you get their soul, you get their mind, all for the price of the hands. The prior mode, right? So much more you can do when you offer these things. And now it's needed. Now it's demanded. So we're here because management hierarchy has outlived its time in a way. It's just simply obsolete. But I'm a fan of the value of it. We need management. We need some way to break down work and clarify who does what. Right? We need some way to get alignment across a team or a whole company. Right? We need these things. Holacracy is still a management framework. It's just management without managers. So people tend to think of it as a divergence from conventional management. I think it's more powerful to think of it as an evolution of, it builds on top of. Right? It's about getting better and better and better at management until it's so integrated into the framework of everything that it just happens. It's emergent, and everyone's involved in it. I think this new constitutional approach, it reinforces that message. Right? It says to everyone, look, you don't have to throw out what you're doing and radically change if you're not ready for that. Just improve it. Get better management. Until you adopt all 5 articles, you're not in a self-managed company. But that's okay. Start where you are. Get a little better. Right? Do something to get even better management and even better management until eventually you no longer need it centralized in managers. And that has opened the door to a whole new level of adoption of these principles. And ironically, we see many companies that come to us saying, I don't want to do holacracy or self-management. That's too much. But can you help us get better at clarifying roles? Right? And we say, sure, yeah. And then they say, well, that was great. You know, our meetings are terrible. Well, we can help with that too. And before they know it, they're actually doing and wanting all of holacracy. Right? The issue is really that it's just not what they think it is. People have all these misconceptions. It's, about people running around and doing everything or making all decisions in big meetings or whatever, which ironically seems to be what happens in most management hierarchies, right? We use meetings entirely too much to make big decisions by consensus. We talk entirely too much, right? There's a lot less organization or coordination than is really needed usually. Other than that, so then people are all running different directions, alignment's hard. People are projecting the fears that they already have because they're living them on holacracy. Until they start stepping into it and they realize, oh, this is actually not what I thought it was. It's really like, it works. It's disciplined, it's focused. It's not some massive departure. And yet it is at the same time. It's the beauty of it. It is both the simplest thing in evolution of management that I can imagine, and it's the most radical departure. It's both. It's hard to bucket it. And another thing on my mind lately is kind of the other side of it. Holacracy's, it's such a beautiful tool for getting an empowering structure, right? Which is so much better than empowering managers, empowering leaders, which I think is almost a contradiction. Right? If you need someone else to empower you, what does it say about you? Right? And what does that say about the system you're in? If you need someone else to empower you, you're in already a fundamentally disempowering system. Right? And frankly, no one can do that. Right? The only person that can empower someone is themselves. But what we can do is put them in a framework, in a system that allows them to find and use power, that doesn't resist it. Management hierarchy often resists it quite significantly. Right? If we put people in a system where they can find and use real power, great. Then they can. So holacracy solves that on the structural side. It changes the nature of the environment we're in, the system, the structure. But it doesn't address what we do as humans in our human-to-human connection and culture. It changes culture. Don't get me wrong, it really does. You change the power structure, culture emerges on top of an underlying power structure. There's a different culture we can have in the world today versus you could potentially have in a feudal empire, right? What's possible between people is limited by the underlying power structure. So in that way, Holacracy frees, it liberates a lot to happen culturally. But it doesn't work at that level. It's not intentionally changing culture. Culture will change. But if you really want culture, that can't happen from a system. That's going to rely on we humans showing up differently. Culture is really just the sum of how we humans show up. No system is going to fundamentally transform the culture if individuals don't choose to show up differently, to interact with others differently. So that's kind of my latest work, is really on that side. How can we, and we is almost the wrong word, because it's got to be I. How can I help create the culture that I most want, right? While leaving room for others to do the same? Holacracy is certainly a part of that answer, because at least it's not in the way, but it's not a complete answer. It wasn't designed to be. So a lot of my attention lately has gone to that. How do we humans connect? Right? How many of you, do a little poll, how many of you have somebody you work with in your company that's not a spouse or significant other that you regularly tell them, I love you? How many? Actually, 2. That's beautiful. 3. 4. Good. You know, that is more than we probably would have seen percentage-wise of this room even 10 years ago or 50 years ago. Good luck. But I want to see a world where it's 90% or more, and the other 10 are just new to the job. You know? How can we have the level of openness, authenticity, vulnerability, intimacy in our companies where we can fall in love with the people we work with? Right? Where we can be our complete, full, authentic, vulnerable selves. You know? And we can see people and love them for who they are. Right? How can we have cultures like that? How can we have more love in the world? You know, one of the things I've always loved about Holacracy was, a friend of mine calls it a stealth spiritual practice. Right? People think they're bringing in a system for operational improvement and efficiency, because it is definitely that. And in that, there's a lesson. It's almost like a mindfulness or meditation practice. Notice your tensions. What are you feeling? Not just in your head and your body. In fact, learn to differentiate between your mind going crazy with all its big plans and what are you actually feeling is in the way of the purpose, in the way of your work. Notice that, become aware of it, and then use your consciousness, harness it to evolve the structure. And then so much of the process, the rules of the governance meeting, for example, and objections and all that, they're there to help hold up mirrors to when are we maybe stuck in something, our ego getting in the way, or our fear getting in the way. Right? And to help us see that, it's in many ways a stealth spiritual practice, one that doesn't require a specific dogma or belief set. It's one where the practice itself changes us, changes our relationship to our own consciousness. Right? That's awesome. And I've loved it because it allows the business world, where we spend so much time in a day, to become a ground for that, for human development, right? For us to expand our consciousness and find a new way to be, to relate. I had one woman who worked at Zappos came up to me very excited when I was doing a training there once and said, I finally get it. What my therapist has been trying to get me to understand in couples counseling for 2 years, and I totally didn't get it. I got it now after about 6 months of Holacracy, right? And that's beautiful. It was related to how to be in her empowerment and connected and loving to her partner without being codependent, without either trying to be a savior to him or play victim, but own her power and stay in connection. And she learned that after a few months of Holacracy, which is great. It's that. How can we then transform our workplaces also into a place where we can just dramatically increase the amount of love and connection that we have in our lives? How can we do that? How can I do that? How can I show up in a way that invites people to drop in to just their most authentic, vulnerable depth of self? First, it's got to be by doing that myself, right? No one's gonna follow me there if I'm not open, loving, open-hearted, sharing myself with them, all of it. And then also, I found accepting them, right? However they are, whoever they are. as soon as we have a sense of what we're rejecting something, we're by definition rejecting people that appreciate that something. Right? So how can we show up embracing everything without losing our discernment? Doesn't mean we can't say, well, wait, I think something's better for this purpose than something else. But how can we show up and just embrace everything and everyone right where they are? Which is also, by the way, the path to being a better Holacracy facilitator for those on that journey. Right? The more your energy is not fighting something, it's just embracing and accepting everything without losing your discernment, you'll be much better at rolling that out. This is also the challenge I found with company values. Actually, this is edgy stuff. This is kind of considered one of the state of the arts and even more progressive business practices is you define company values to define a culture. And I did that 20 years ago. My last company was built on a really solid set of values, and I saw the beauty and the power of it. It really helped, and it limited. And now I question that. There's got to be a better way. In the same way management hierarchy was once considered the leading edge of organization, and maybe not so much anymore. But values build into the culture a shadow. Whatever you see as the opposite of what you value becomes a shadow. It becomes a culturally sanctioned shadow. It's okay to push against whatever the opposite of the values are. But there's always a positive to that. You might say, hey, well, we value adaptability. We then push against, rigidness. Except wait, you throw out rigidness, you're probably throwing out the upside of it too, which we might describe as maybe standardization or maybe structure and having clarity and all that. One of the beauties of Holacracy and why it's so widely applicable to all different types of companies and cultures is that it doesn't bias towards either side of a polarity. It doesn't value adaptability any more or less than it values stability. It values both. Right? Which is part of the challenge of it. Whatever it is you most value yourself, you'll probably find a lot of it with Holacracy, but it comes at a price. You must be equally prepared to embrace its opposite. Right? And in that is its power. How can we do that culturally? How can I show up in a way where I might have my preferences? I might have the things that just feel right to me, right? My values, but where I also make room for all sets of values. How can I also leave room for even what feels like a conflicting value and recognize there's some wisdom in there? There's got to be. How can we have a company culture defined, congealed, formed, not by choosing a single set of values? Values come from mind. They're principles or values. They're a mental construct. Right? How can we have a culture that's formed and stabilized, not from any mental construct that encourages us to reject part of reality, part of the world, and part of people, but that instead comes from heart? Right? How can we have the kind of culture where we don't need values to give us integration, to bring people together, to give us a sense of we? Because we create a sense of we by showing up authentically ourselves and loving everyone and everything we can. Right? There's a type of culture, a bringing people together that can happen when we stay in our heart to form community, to form connection. We don't need values with that, and it's more powerful. Because when we can do that well, we can take people with very conflicting values and enable them both to bring their gifts to the table. So I'm searching for different ways to form community, different ways to norm, right? Norm a community together. Ways that come from the heart and not from our minds and its values and principles and all that. Right? That's kind of what my current focus in life has been. Yeah. I capture my current evolution of my personal purpose. Referencing this, I'll say this and I'll end on that and we'll move into the dialogues. It's evolved. When I was earlier in my journey with Holacracy, I had a purpose that if I shared my old one, you would probably recognize it if you know Holacracy. There's so much in there. It's what led to Holacracy in so many ways. And now it still includes what Holacracy brings, but it's broadened a bit. I capture it, I use a methodology from an author named Tim Kelly. He has a book, True Purpose. And he separates purpose into 4 components. Right? And I love this, by the way, for companies as well. When I help companies with purpose, I think this methodology works really well. And these 4 elements each provide a different type of information. So the 4 elements, one is the mission, which is like, go change the world in this way, the big goal. Right? So my company's mission, Holacracy One, my company is evolve humanity's relationship to power. My personal purpose, the newest version of it, the mission is make love the norming force of the human community. The next component is blessing, which is how do you repeatedly transform others when you're doing your purpose, when you're living your purpose? How is it impacting and transforming others? What's the blessing you offer them? Right? The blessing I capture for myself is I help people love what they're rejecting. You can see that some in that thing I mentioned about values, or even my relationship to conventional management. It's great. How do we love it? If we want to evolve it, best way to do it is to love it. Same with any human. You want to change them, you got to love them first. I help people love what they're rejecting. And the next component is essence, which is the being quality of purpose. Right? When you're living your purpose, what does it feel like? What's the internal being sense, the energy of it that others can probably feel from you? I capture my essence as I am love playfully exploring everything. And those who know me, at least know me in the past few years, that's quite accurate. I hear things like that a lot. And the final component is message. Message is like what wants to get through you to the world, right? What do you want people to get? What do you want to shout from the rooftops if people were ready to hear it? Here's my message. The breaking wave is terrified until it remembers it's the ocean. The breaking wave is alone until it remembers it's the ocean. The breaking wave doesn't know its strength until it remembers it's the ocean. The breaking wave doesn't know itself until it remembers it's the ocean. Remember, you're the ocean. Thank you all.